The fog is lifting. Clarity is calling you forward. Welcome to Forward in Freedom. I'm Tanya Johnson. This is where awareness becomes power. Let's move forward in freedom.
What if one of the clearest signs you're healing is that peace still feels uncomfortable? Think about that. Life is calmer, the pressure has eased, the crisis is over, yet part of you still feels like something is about to go wrong. Why? Because some people have left survival mode physically while still living in it emotionally. The environment changed, but the internal response never got the message. Life improved, but part of you still is preparing for the old version of life. Healing becomes more complex when your environment starts calming down, but your mind and your body are still functioning like they're preparing for survival. Chronic stress changes more than emotions. Over time, it can reshape the way a person thinks, responds, connects, and experiences the world around them. One of the hardest realities to recognize is that survival mode can eventually start feeling normal, not healthy, normal. And survival mode doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it looks like constantly staying busy, overthinking every situation, struggling to relax, emotionally preparing for problems, staying hyper aware all the time, feeling guilty during rest. Some people live so long in pressure, unpredictability, emotional instability, over responsibility, constant tension that their nervous system adapted to functioning in stress. And once stress becomes familiar, peace can initially feel uncomfortable. Not because peace is unhealthy, but because your body became conditioned to expect tension constantly. That's very important to understand because people often confuse tension with productivity, emotional intensity with passion, chaos with connection, hypervigilance with responsibility. As you hear that list, which one resonates most with you? Which pattern have you normalized without even recognizing it? Because what many people interpret as personality is sometimes a nervous system that adapted to instability. When survival mode becomes familiar, peace can initially feel uncomfortable. And here's why calm can feel emotionally unfamiliar. Most people say they want peace, but internally, they spent years adapting to pressure. So when life finally slows down emotionally, something unexpected happens. Their nervous system keeps searching for problems, conflict, disappointment, emotional tension, signs that something is about to go wrong. Not because they enjoy dysfunction, but because dysfunction became both familiar and expected. Over time, constant pressure can become so familiar that calm almost feels suspicious. They finally get a peaceful weekend and still can't relax. Their phone is quiet and they immediately assume something is wrong. A healthy relationship feels stable and part of them starts waiting for disappointment. A good season begins and instead of enjoying it, they brace themselves emotionally for it to end. That's what survival mode does. It trains the nervous system to expect instability even after life begins changing. And healing requires learning that peace is not danger, rest is not danger, calm is not danger, stability is not danger. Relearning emotional safety is often a gradual process. Some people don't struggle with peace because it's unhealthy, they struggle because it's unfamiliar territory. Survival mode also changes the way people experience relationships because when someone becomes emotionally conditioned to chaos, a healthy connection can also initially feel different. Why? Because healthy relationships often feel slower, steadier, calmer, emotionally safer, less emotionally extreme. And people who spent years surviving emotional instability sometimes mistake intensity for intimacy. And that realization can be life changing because emotional highs and lows are not proof of deeper love. Constant unpredictability is not proof of passion. And emotional exhaustion is not proof of a stronger connection. Sometimes those patterns simply reveal a nervous system that became attached to instability. And healing requires learning the difference between chaos and connection, survival and safety, emotional intensity and emotional security. Understanding that distinction can completely reshape how someone experiences relationships. Calm relationships can feel unfamiliar when your nervous system was trained by chaos. One of the most confusing parts of healing is realizing your body may still be living in survival mode long after the crisis has ended. Mentally, you may know life is becoming healthier. Spiritually, you may believe God is leading you into greater peace. But emotionally, your body may still react like danger is nearby, still bracing, still preparing, still expecting disruption. And that disconnection can feel frustrating because part of you recognizes the growth while another part of you still feels emotionally conditioned for survival. That's why healing can feel uncomfortable even while it is happening. Because real healing is not only about changing environments externally, it's also about retraining the mental patterns that survival mode created over time. And that process requires patience, self awareness, grace, emotional honesty, consistency, not shame. Healing is not just leaving survival mode externally, it's learning safety internally. While listening today, you may have started recognizing ways survival mode has shaped your reactions, relationships, emotional patterns, or sense of peace. Those are the kinds of emotional patterns we work through every day at Clear Direction Coaching. I've watched individuals gain greater clarity, stronger confidence, healthier boundaries, and a renewed sense of peace simply by understanding patterns they had never fully recognized before. Because awareness is often the beginning of meaningful change. If you're ready to strengthen your emotional clarity, confidence, boundaries, and healing journey, you can schedule a complimentary 15-minute consultation at www.cleardirectioncoaching.com. And if relationship dynamics are part of your healing process, the Gathering Alliance Relationship Assessment has helped individuals recognize relationships patterns, communication challenges, and areas for growth they may not have seen clearly on their own. But healing doesn't stop with awareness. Over time, it begins changing the way you see yourself. And somewhere along that journey, a different question begins to emerge. Who do you become when survival is no longer required? Because that's often where people discover a part of their healing journey they never expected. For some, survival mode slowly became a way of life. They became strong through pressure, productive through anxiety, emotionally guarded through disappointment, hyper aware through instability, resilient through survival. So when healing begins, there can be an identity shift because now you're learning how to exist without constantly surviving something emotionally. And that can create an adjustment period most people never see coming, especially for people who spent years believing their value was connected to how much pressure they could carry. But your worth was never meant to be measured by your exhaustion. And God did not create you merely to survive emotionally from one crisis to the next. He created you to experience peace, love, wholeness, clarity, stability, healthy connection. And sometimes healing means realizing you no longer have to earn rest. What often surprises people is how emotional that realization can be. I know for me personally, there were seasons where peace felt almost unfamiliar because I had spent so many years solving problems, carrying responsibilities, and preparing for what might go wrong next. So when life became calmer, part of me still felt responsible for staying emotionally prepared. And that's a mindset that takes time to unlearn. Because for many of us, survival mode convinced us that slowing down was weakness. Rest had to be justified. Peace had to be earned. Constant pressure meant we were valuable. So learning how to live without emotional overload can feel strangely uncomfortable at first until healing teaches us peace is not laziness, rest is not failure, calm is not something to fear. And we no longer have to stay emotionally overwhelmed in order to feel valuable. Some people become so familiar with surviving, they forget peace was possible too. As healing continues, something powerful starts changing internally. You stop constantly expecting disappointment. You stop emotionally preparing for disaster every day. You stop interpreting calm as something temporary. And slowly, your nervous system begins learning that stability is safe. That changes everything because now rest no longer feels irresponsible. Calm no longer feels suspicious. Healthy relationships no longer feel boring. Peace no longer feels fragile. And one day you notice something surprising. You made it through an entire day without waiting for something bad to happen, an entire conversation without preparing for conflict, an entire week without emotionally bracing for disappointment. And what once felt difficult to trust begins feeling natural. That's when people realize healing has been happening all along. Some people become so emotionally prepared for chaos, they forget what safety felt like. There is so much freedom in finally feeling safe enough to breathe again emotionally, to rest without guilt, to experience peace without waiting for it to disappear, to enjoy calm without feeling responsible for creating the next crisis, and to trust that stability does not mean something bad is about to happen next. Real healing begins when peace starts feeling safe. Consider this: peace doesn't always reveal what has healed. Sometimes peace reveals what still needs healing. When life becomes calm, do you immediately search for problems, expect disappointment, create unnecessary worry, feel restless without pressure, struggle to relax emotionally? Or are you slowly learning that stability does not require fear? Because healing often begins the moment your nervous system realizes it no longer has to survive everything. Peace feels different when your body finally believes survival mode is over. Think about the areas of your life where peace still feels difficult to trust. Where have you confused tension with productivity or emotional intensity with connection? What might change emotionally if peace stopped feeling temporary for you? And who could you become if your life no longer revolved around survival mode? A lot of people quietly struggle with adjusting to peace after living in stress for so long, especially those who become emotionally conditioned to pressure, instability, or constant responsibility. So I love to hear from you. What part of peace or stability has felt the most challenging to embrace during your healing journey? And when did you first realize survival mode has shaped you more deeply than you thought? Your story may help someone else recognize patterns that they've been struggling to understand themselves. And if these conversations have been helping you grow, heal, or feel less alone, make sure you subscribe, like, and share the podcast with someone who may also need this message. If this conversation brought clarity to something you've been experiencing but couldn't quite put into words, this may be the right time to go deeper. You can schedule a complimentary 15-minute consultation through www.cleardirectioncoaching.com. You can also explore the Gathering Alliance Relationship Assessment and my book, A Woman's Exodus Only by Grace. All the resources and links are available in the episode notes. Over the next few weeks, we're continuing deeper conversations around healing, identity, emotional patterns, relationships, and personal growth. But we're also going to start stepping into some new environments, experiences, and conversation that reflect what life can look like after survival mode. And I'm really looking forward to bringing you into parts of that journey. One of the conversations we'll be exploring soon is this: how do you recognize when you've outgrown environments that once felt normal? Why do some people feel emotionally disconnected from spaces they used to fit into? And what happens when growth changes the way you relate to old environments, familiar conversations, and even previous versions of yourself? That conversation may challenge the way some people see their current season of growth. I know it's going to spark some important reflection, and I hope you'll join me for that conversation. I'm Tanya J, and this is the work of walking forward in freedom. Until we meet again, move forward in freedom.